Hi, good morning, students. If you're watching this, it means that somehow the webinar thing didn't work out. And so I made this recording, or I'm making this recording on the day that I'm leaving to go to Mexico to do some work with my nonprofit. And I don't want you to miss this content, so I want to make sure that you get it next Tuesday, a week from today. Let's see, we got a bad light in the background. Let me see if I can turn that off. That makes a bit of a difference, doesn't it? Okay, so anyway, good afternoon. If you're watching this at 2 o'clock on Tuesday, it's 4 o'clock my time where I am. And as I said, we're working on, I have a conference room all arranged, and so it should work. I'm trying to get the lighting right here. Just a second. There. Okay, so that should work. All right, so we're going to talk about one aspect of being a leader that is probably not necessarily intuitive to you guys at this point, and we're going to make it so by our conversation and the quite a bit of experience that I've had with this. So up until this point, what I've been giving you is some minimal information about nonprofit organizations and public organizations and how they are organized, how they're funded, and to some extent how they work. I'll come back to that again probably the end of November and give you, I've already given you the slides, or I will have posted the slides, but I want to talk about that a bit because then we'll have a better way to understand what we mean by governance and what we mean by role responsibilities and what we mean about accountability. But that's all coming later on. But all of the several articles that I've given you on expert leadership and what leaderships do have focus on, at least from my perspective, strengths and what to amplify in terms of what you do well, and to not devote so much time to improving on things that might not really matter in your position. That they found that, in fact, your Strength Finders book, I'll remind you of that today when we're in class. But the Strength Finders book says that leaders, they interviewed so many leaders and studied so many leaders over a period of 40 years. And what they found, and there's documenting other evidence to show that people do better when they're given feedback on what they do than when they're given feedback and criticism on what they do wrong. And the underlying mechanism of that is that when we focus on what people do wrong, it chips away at our self-esteem. And the subjects that support how important that is suggest that, in fact, suggest very strongly that the most secure, confident people actually succeed better in life. Now, the first measure that they talk about in excuse me, it's really early this morning. I had to get this done before I left. Okay, so the first measure is that people do financially better than people who don't have a high self-esteem. The second thing is that people enjoy their work better because they find themselves fitting into places that appreciate them. They search for that. And then the third thing is they're healthier. They have a better lifestyle and probably, in consequence, a better, happier life. So it's really important to, and I've said this over and over again, but it's really important to focus on your strengths and to kind of leverage those strengths in the kind of jobs that you look for and the kind of jobs that you take. I'll mention this twice. I'll mention it in this recording, and I will mention it in my class this afternoon. But the ethics of the MBTI oh God, how do you put it? I think it requires people like me, people who've been certified, who've been trained and certified in it, to disavow any use of the MBTI for hiring purposes or for job placement purposes. Now, this is not true with the Strengths Finders. And with the Strength Finders, I've had many anecdotes of how helpful it was to people who were applying for positions or for people who were applying for promotions to take the Strength Finders, check it out, work it out, read it carefully, read the book carefully, what the words actually mean and what they mean to you in your own behavior. And then use that as part of the discussion with a potential employer, or a potential supervisor or manager for a promotion. That there are, certain jobs require certain strengths, and if you've got those strengths and you can document them with the Strengths Finders, then you have a better chance of at least getting listened to for the job or for the promotion. I recently had a coaching client who has such an amazing history, fabulous history, really interesting history in her personal life, which I can't go into, except that she was married to a Navy guy, one of the SEALs that does the submarine bomb diffusion. I was on a submarine for like 8 months in the Mediterranean and whatever. And they went through this really interesting period of time before he went, where he got more and more distant from her because he didn't want to be so attached and so, I guess, quote, in love, because he was afraid he was going to die. So anyway, the good news is that she was a support for him when he was over there, and he didn't die, so he's back. But the main story about the Strength Finders with her is that she was working for a nonprofit, and she was making a fabulous salary at this nonprofit. It was a religious affiliated nonprofit in a congregation that she belonged to, and this woman is dynamite. She's really, really good. But she had a level of position that was 3 down from the CEO, and he was just a total boob. I mean, he was just a total ineffective, inefficient, taking everybody in the wrong direction, demanding the wrong things from people. And so she tells it like it is, and so she kept confronting him with it, and so finally she quit. She just finally quit. But then she found herself in a position where any jobs that she'd applied for, the salary was so low because she'd had it bumped up at the other place because, first of all, she was that religion. She was super competent, and super confident, and they needed her. The organization, it's a small organization, but it's kind of fallen apart. And so when I got her after about 2 months of unemployment, and she's a very active person, and she was just going bananas because she didn't have a job. She had savings that she was living on, so she was okay financially for about another 6 months. And so she came to me, and so I immediately said, well, it sounds to me like you have an incredible amount of competencies in many, many different areas. What do you think? And she said, well, yeah, I guess. After 2 months of unemployment, her self-confidence was tanking. And I said, well, I've got two tests, 2 assessments I'd like for you to take. The first one is the MBTI. She says, what is that? So I told her what that was, and she was intrigued. And then I told her about the Strength Finders. So she said, oh, that sounds more like what's going to fit with what I need, but I'll take both if you want me to. So she took the Strength Finders. She took both. And she took the Strength Finders and absolutely blew me away. First of all, I think you have the option to take it for free, and then they give you other options so you get more analysis. And she took everything. She came in and she knew her strengths backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards. And she had amazing strengths, and many of them were competencies that were technical competencies or problem solving competencies, strategic thinking kinds of strengths. And she was really, really low on relationship building. And we spent most of our time talking about the strategic thinking and the problem solving, because that's what she could bring to an organization. But this is something to really remember, that in any organization no matter what your position. Organizations work in groups. Many of the problems in organizations get addressed in groups, and that means other people, and that means you have to find a way to work with other people. And she was so bluntly honest in her assessments of what others did and the processes. And as a consequence, she hurt a lot of feelings, and she had a really, really difficult time with other people. I could see it. I could see it sometimes in our relationship. And so she had two things going for her. The first thing was that she had this incredible strategic thinking cluster of strengths. She also had the expediter cluster of strengths that she was. I think she had. They counted all 32 of hers, and I think she had 3 in that first category. And then there was one that was in relationship building that, oh God, I wish I could remember it, because it'd be really interesting for you guys to know. I'll try to dig up her profile and talk about her, because it was really really interesting. But so we focused on the competencies that she had for the kind of job that she was looking for, because she really was really good at straightening out systems and communication systems and data processing systems in the organization that she came from. And she she worked all the time. She was like, that's why she was so down when she lost her job, is because she's used to being really engaged and busy. So we didn't have to work too much on those, except how to frame them to fit the kind of jobs that she was looking for. But what we did is we took the relationship piece that she had, and we began to expand on that, so that I made her play out with me the way to talk to people. So we did lots of role plays, but the way to talk to people so that she could assert, so she could give her point of view, so she could stay congruent with her position of honesty, while at the same time having a touch of empathy, having a touch of being able to put herself in the situation of the other person. And so she discovered, she was out of work for a long time. I believe it was about 9 months. And in the meantime, she was also studying for certification in Salesforce, because I think once you get that, the kind of jobs that she was looking for would just fall in her lap. Plus, she just blows you away with what she knows. So she landed a really, really, back up. There was a job that she really wanted, which was with the Navy, some services to the Navy, and it was providing family services for deployed sailors, for deployed Marines. And that was really dear to her heart, because she actually was going through it or had been through it. And she didn't get hired for that job. But she didn't get hired for that job because she did not know at that point how to tap into her own empathy potential and how to express it to other people. So so we really, really, really had to work on that. So the good news, though, is that she's got a job now. That is her absolute total dream job. She works for Red Rover, and Red Rover is a company that I think it rescues dogs, or it connects people who are against the center, the animal shelters that euthanize. So it's a let all dogs live kind of operation. And she went in, and their system, it's nationwide, so there's chapters everywhere, and their information system was a disaster. And she went in as a volunteer, because she said, let me show you what I can do. And then kind of a last gasp effort to get a job she really wanted. And so she said, let me show you what I can do, and give me 2 weeks, and then if you want to hire me, then that'll be great. So she went in 2 weeks and straightened up a ton of stuff, and they were just blown away. So they had intended to hire as a part-time position, but they really wanted her and wanted to keep her. So they hired her full-time, and they hired her at higher salary than she asked for. And one of the pieces that made them really pay attention to her was she went in with her StrengthsFinders assessment, and she sat down and she said, now I've spent a lot of time looking at myself and contemplating what kind of person I want to be in the workplace. And I have a coach. She said, I have a coach, and my coach had me take this assessment, and here's the assessment, and let me tell you why the strengths that I have fit the needs of your organization. Now, if you can do that, you've taken the first step. You've taken the free assessment that gives you 5 strengths, and so that's enough, plenty to work on for right now while you're in school. Like, don't even think about trying to do more. But she used that assessment and the insight about herself that she got from it, and she connected it to what the organization need, and it worked perfectly. Not all situations work perfectly like that, but if you work at it and spend time analyzing it and thinking about it, then you will have can come up with a tremendous amount of insight. So I encourage you to do that. You actually have a paper that's due on, I believe, November 14th, that I ask you to look at, contemplate, think about. Don't just sit down and write it, but really think through what you want to say in terms of combining these 2 assessments, because they tell you a tremendous amount. Or they suggest. I don't say they tell necessarily, but they suggest, and then you decide if it tells you something. Okay, so I got off on that because I was talking about organizations and how you might fit into organizations. And as leaders in organizations, almost every list that you see of what kinds of things a leader, especially in a nonprofit, but it's totally true in profit organizations also, is what skills, what competencies do leaders have to have. Many of those competencies are people skills, communication skills, conflict management skills, influencing skills, all those interpersonal communication behaviors, mindsets, ways of approaching others that we're going to spend time on, believe me. And so I'm not going to talk about that right now because there's something equally important. There's a 2-branch thing here when you're beginning to think about yourself as a leader, and you think about, okay, what are the expectations out there for me as a leader? And one of them is that you are able to have a beginning skill level in all of those relationship building competencies that I just mentioned, but that you also have the ability to approach an issue, to approach a problem, and to be able to come up with an understanding of that problem or issue such that you have a pathway to address the problem. And in my work, I call it, my colleagues call it problem statements, worksheets. No, what do we call it? Problem statement solutions. And so we start out with, I probably should show some slides if I can do my camera back and forth. So I'm going to turn this off for a moment and get the slides up.